Welcome to Now We're Getting Somewhere. I'm Katie, and I'm a certified life coach, but I've also been a management consultant at McKinsey and a product manager at a tech startup. In other words, I know what it feels like to have a life that looks pretty good on paper, but doesn't feel as good as I want it to. I help my professional clients develop lives that are more meaningful, happy, and also more successful. And I want to share the same practical insights with you. Let's go. I have been noticing that when I press record on these podcasts, I always just have a lot going on in my body. Like all the things within me start to fire up of like nervousness or just like a lot of sensation and also like a desire to get things just right in a way that I don't experience, for example, when I'm coaching my clients. I think maybe because when I'm coaching my clients, there's kind of no do-overs. Like I just have to say what I've said and then it's out there. And with this, at any time, I could just pause it and go back and re-record. I was reflecting on that. Maybe it's that. It's like, well, if your hey guys was too perky, you can be more calm. Or if it was too calm, you can be more perky. And I am just trying to practice arriving as I am today. And also practicing, I think there is some part of me that keeps hoping that if I like sit in my chair and breathe for long enough before I hit record, that I won't have all the feelings come up for me. Because I don't like recording from a place of kind of just like putting it down. It feels like I really want to show up as authentically and present as I can for all of you. I don't want to push it down, even though that's sometimes what we got to do in life, but not for this. And I think I keep hoping that at some point I'll just be so calm that I won't feel agitated when I press record, but maybe that will never happen. Maybe this is just how I arrive, and that's okay. Okay, so those are some things I wanted to share with you. But today I wanted to share with you a generally useful prescription. This prescription is for you if you are experiencing any of the following. You are feeling more anxious than you'd like, more down than you'd like, more numb than you'd like, more sad than you'd like, or more stuck or frustrated or uninspired or dull than you'd like. This prescription is for you if you're beginning to wonder whether you need to end your relationship or move across the country or quit your job and pursue your long dormant dream of becoming a late night TV comedy writer. This is for you if you are convinced that you need to suddenly go keto or suddenly throw out all the sugar in your house or suddenly get rid of your smartphone or suddenly do a 75 hard, as the internet has recently acquainted me with. This prescription is like Advil for a variety of life's emotional and existential pains. It solves some issues completely, like maybe that headache was just a passing issue, and thank you, Advil, it is now gone. And for some issues, it reduces the pain significantly, at least temporarily, which nonetheless is extremely useful because if you are in this panicky and anxious place, it is highly likely that you are going to make decisions and take actions that are just not the best possible choices for you. So instead of, for example, putting in your notice today at work, take this prescription and check in with yourself, or heck, check in with me 3 days later. So today I wanted to share how I came up with this prescription and what this prescription actually is. But before I do that, I just want to share one more final note about who this prescription is for, just by talking about who it is not for. This prescription is not for people in the most severe form of burnout, which I call level 1. And you can go back to episode 5 of my podcast, which is all about burnout, where I talk more about my level-based system for classifying burnout. I say this because I can almost guarantee that a solid percentage of you listening to this episode are in level 1 of burnout recovery, which, by the way, doesn't necessarily look like being so tired that you can't get out of bed. Actually, often folks in level 1 from the outside look like they're killing it at work and attending to their kids as a very competent and loving parent, and they're going on family vacations while also just being really exhausted and bone dry energy-wise on the inside. In some ways, people in level 1 may resonate with this episode because, yes, they are probably feeling anxious or stuck or down or depressed or overwhelmed. It's very normal to feel anxious or stuck or down or depressed or overwhelmed when you are burnt out. And they will want to take the actions I suggest because they'll be able to see, and of course they'll be right about this, that the actions would serve them. But here's the other thing. People in level 1 may not, and honestly probably will not, have the energy to take on what I'm about to talk about in this prescription. And because I know these people, and because I have worked with so many of these people, and because I have been one of these people myself, I am worried that they will listen to this podcast and either try to implement it and then fail and beat themselves up and have used up extremely precious energy reserves in both the doing and the beating themselves up, or they won't even try to implement it, but then they will use precious energy reserves and just beating themselves up for not even trying. And no, I will not be encouraging this kind of behavior on my tiny corner of the internet. So let me be very, very, very clear. When you are in the most serious form of burnout, and for some of you, I will also say, even the word burnout just kind of triggers something in you that wants to distance yourself from that word and say, oh, it's not me. I'm not burnt out. So if that's happening right now, you can just substitute the word exhaustion. If you are very, very exhausted, let me be clear. Your number one job is to rest however feels best to you, and any extra milliseconds of energy should be spent in clearing your calendar or negotiating, trading off childcare responsibility time with your spouse so you can have more time off, or very politely declining invitations or meetings or whatever the heck you need to do so that you can rest in the way that you need to rest. And after you have done that for some time, when you do feel that you have a little bit more juice, then yes, the actions here will absolutely serve you. They all have an excellent return on energy, or ROE, which is a term that I think I invented. I've never heard it before, that describes how the energy that you put into doing something will give you energy back. And typically these actions, like I said, all have an excellent ROE. And so they'll give you back a lot more than you put into them. And in the process, they will calm some anxiety or give you some mental clearness. They're great actions. But even though you may feel anxious and stuck and frustrated and like something isn't right in your life, if you are extremely burnt out, and again, this is something you will feel on the inside, even if things look hunky-dory or even highly functioning on the outside, please do not beat yourself up if this is not for you at this exact moment in time. Please go back and listen to episodes 5 and 6 of my podcast, which are all about recovering from burnout. Okay, so with that being said, I wanted to give you the background to this prescription. And I will say, even as I say this, I can feel in my body this sense of urgency, this sense of just get to the prescription, Katie, stop giving too much background. The people want the prescription. But also, I really believe that human stories have a really powerful effect on memory and a powerful effect on connection. And when we remember something and when we feel connected to the person who suggested it, that has a really significant effect on actually doing stuff. So when I have a personal story to share that's relevant, I do try to share it here. So I created this idea of a prescription 6.5 years ago when I was living in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I remember it was the winter, kind of January of 2017. And I realized that I've been feeling kind of depressed for a few weeks, which for me is a fairly extended period of time to feel that way. And to be clear, here I am describing depression in a non-clinical sense. I was getting out of bed, I was meeting commitments at work and in my personal life. And in sharing this, honestly, I was tempted to describe that feeling as, oh, I felt down and sad and a little numb, just to avoid even having to make this clarification, but if I'm sharing honestly and openly, depression feels like the right word. I think it is human and normal to experience feelings of depression from time to time without it being a full-blown clinical condition, though of course clinical depression is also absolutely real, of course. But for me, feeling down and sad and a little numb and yes, depressed for a few days wouldn't super shock me. I am a person with plenty of feelings and I am very accustomed to all the forms that feelings can take. But it had really lingered, this experience of depression. I'd realized that I'd come to a few recurring phone conversations with a few separate friends. So, conversations that I would have every 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And each time I'd been like, oh yeah, I'm feeling kind of down, not too much to share. And that was my sign. These calls, like I said, are a few weeks apart and I'd had the same reaction each time. So it was my sign to myself that this had kind of gone on for too long. So I started to think a little bit about my life. Like, was there anything wrong that was causing me to feel this way? And it was clear to me that there was nothing truly wrong in my life at the time. There was nothing circumstantial, so no dramatic relationship situation or loss or work anxiety or whatever. I had all the normal level of worries humming in the background, as we all do, but nothing bigger than usual. So I started thinking about my actions. Am I letting any of my normal stuff slip that makes me feel good? And at the time, my two most core self-care practices were my morning pages, which is a daily journaling practice, and my daily walk. But I was actually doing both of those, so that wasn't the problem. I was also getting plenty of sleep, and I was showering, and I was eating in a way that felt right to me. So I kept kind of reflecting on it, thinking, is there anything that I can do to feel better? Because I really don't like this way that I'm feeling. And I kept writing on it and reflecting on it, and I eventually came up with two hypotheses. The first one was I was spending too much time at home alone. I worked from home in Chapel Hill, and while I did take a walk outside most days, and not infrequently, I would go to a coffee shop or the public library to work, I would also have extended periods of time, days at a time where I just went nowhere, except, of course, as I said, for my daily walk. And honestly, before that moment, I had never really thought it was a problem because in the context of my life story, my Chapel Hill years were a period of time where I was really recovering from some pretty intense, introvert exhaustion. I think I was finally profoundly embracing my own energy needs after years probably of being socially overstimulated and just more generally doing too much. And at the time, I didn't know a ton of people in Chapel Hill except Gil, who was my boyfriend at the time and is now my husband. And Gil worked in an office, so he was gone all day. And I had a few friendly acquaintances in town, but really not many and not even people I saw that often. And like I said, I was in this period of really intense recovery from being exhausted and socially stimulated for so long. So for a long time after moving to Chapel Hill, I was just so happy to be quiet and alone for these huge stretches of time. It felt amazing to have so much quiet alone time. But then I started to wonder if maybe actually I had finally sort of tipped over the edge to have too much quiet alone time and if it was causing its own problems. So that was my first hypothesis. Maybe I was spending too much time alone at home. And my second hypothesis was maybe I was spending too much time on the internet. Because if we're being honest, I was spending a lot of time on the internet. And again, this was part of this sort of multi-year period in my late 20s when I got my energy back. And as part of that, at the time, I thought it was really helpful for rejuvenating myself to kind of veg on the internet. What was I doing on the internet? And to answer that question, I would say, what does anyone do on the internet? I mean, I was reading lifestyle blogs. I was Googling what celebrities' spouses looked like and then judging them. I was probably checking my email 15 times a day, even though how many emails did I actually get? And I had 2 jobs at the time. I had my coaching practice, but then I was still also working part-time for McKinsey. But despite both of those, I did have a solid amount of free time during the day. And I was spending a lot of it vegging on the internet. So I had developed these 2 hypotheses and I was like, okay, Katie, your prescription is for 3 consecutive days to do 2 things. Number 1, get out of the house for 2 hours a day consecutively. So not just total, but together beyond your daily walk. So get out of the house 2 hours a day beyond the amount of time I was already leaving the house for my walk. And 2, only do recreational internet when you are out of the house. So only do your recreational internet. So nothing, I could do business related things like Zoom with my clients or respond to a client email or whatever at home, but I could only do recreational internet outside of the house. And these 2 practices felt decently complementary. Like I could still, if I wanted to, look up what celebrity spouses looked like, but I had to be out of the house if I wanted to do that. I had to go do that at a library or a coffee shop. And look, because I'm an introvert, I wasn't going to do that for 5 hours a day. I was going to go to the coffee shop, do that for a bit, probably work for some of the rest of the time, and then go home after my allotted 2 hours. And what was really different for me about this experiment at the time was how I spoke to myself about it. Somehow I had decided in my mind these 2 actions would be my natural antidepressants. That's literally what I call them in my mind, natural antidepressants. And I would say to myself, because I didn't really feel like doing them when I started, I would say, look, Katie, this is medication. You need to take your medication. And to be clear, hopefully this goes without being said, but I also, of course, have enormous respect for all kinds of actual medications for psychological ailments. So I don't use that language to somehow diminish the utility and genuine importance of real prescription antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication or anything like that. But referring to it in this way was a way of acknowledging to myself that my issues actually felt fairly serious and I needed to take the addressing of them seriously as well. So referring to it as a prescription made me feel like, okay, Katie, if you refuse to take your meds that you need and you feel bad, I mean, let's be honest, it's kind of your fault at that point. So take your meds. Follow the prescription you need to follow. And for whatever reason, in that particular season of my life, that way of talking to myself, it just felt really good and right. So I implemented it, my quote unquote prescription, as I called it in my head. I got out of the house for 2 hours a day together, consecutive, and I did recreational internet only outside of the house. And honestly, I was shocked by the results because by the end of the first day, after being kind of depressed for a few weeks, I felt a solid boost in my mood. It was noticeable. And then by the end of the second day, I felt a quite significant boost in my mood, even more so than after that first day. And then by the end of day 3, I felt normal, not depressed. I felt kind of fine. And honestly, I was kind of shocked because I hadn't done anything that radical. I just gotten out of the house for 2 freaking hours a day and not done anything pleasurable on the internet at home. And I will say that second practice was actually harder for me than the first one. I was pretty used to vegging on the internet at night or throughout the day, for example, but I got it done. And again, after being kind of depressed for a few weeks, to suddenly feel basically back to my baseline, that was a big deal. And so I have used this concept of a prescription, either the exact one I did or modifications of it, which I'll talk about in a second, in the years since. I use it when I get depressed for more than a day or 2, or when I feel like I'm just kind of skewing anxious for an extended period of time, or just beginning to feel that kind of itch in your skin that begins to make you think you need to take big radical action. Sometimes I call it I need to throw out all the sugar in my house feeling. I find that it either solves the problem completely, like it did with my feelings of depression over 6 years ago, or it can reduce it enough that I can think and feel into that issue so much more clearly without making a decision from a place of feeling like I'm backed into a corner. Because truly, do we ever make our best decisions when we feel like we're backed into a corner? No, we don't. So I took my personal insights and I transformed them into this concept of a generally useful prescription, which I wrote about, I think 3 years ago in my newsletter. And it was one of those essays that even months later, people would send me emails and say, wait, can you send me that one again about the generally useful prescription? I can't find it and I just feel like I need it. And it's been a few years since I wrote that, and I have a few more thoughts, so I just thought I would share about it here on the podcast. So it's always easy to find whenever you need it. So again, what I'm about to share is a generally useful prescription for when you are feeling down or stuck or frustrated or anxious or dull. And it's also for when you feel that you need to take a big dramatic action, but something inside of you thinks, maybe we should just slow down for a sec. This prescription resolves some ailments completely, and for others, it reduces enough, as I said, that you can think and breathe and make decisions from a place of that sort of not being backed into a corner experience. So the first essential thing to say is that I want you to follow the following prescription for 3 consecutive days. I hope you caught that part. 3. You may feel better after 1, but 1 is not enough. 2 might make a solid difference, but the best results will be from 3. The second thing to say here is that there are 7 practices that make up this prescription. These are the 7 things that I have found to make the biggest and fastest difference in turning things around for people. Obviously, there's other things. My whole profession is finding things that people can do to turn things around, but these ones make the biggest and fastest difference. And let's be clear, for most people, many or even most of these practices you might already be doing. So if so, perfect, ignore those ones. The purpose of this generally useful prescription is for you to customize based on what you need. So you just want to focus on the ones that you are not yet doing. So you typically would not be taking on all 7 of these for the 3 days because you'll be doing some of them already. And of course, if you listen to this list and you're like, I'm not doing any of them, then do not make yourself crazy taking on 7 new practices. If I was your coach, I would probably suggest starting with 2. But just so you have them all, here are the 7 practices that make up my generally useful prescription. The first one is 30 minutes of gentle, pleasurable exercise. So a walk outside counts, and so does yoga or just putting on some gentle heart music on Spotify and stretching. In general, unless you're one of those people who has been doing high intensity workouts every day for the past decade to the point where high intensity doesn't actually feel super intense, I do not actually recommend high intensity exercise as part of this prescription. And there is a reason for that. The reason is that often when we do a intense workout, on one hand, yes, we can sometimes burn off, quote unquote, intense feelings, but in doing so, we often dissociate a little bit. We leave ourselves in order to make it through that intense workout. And actually, I kind of want you doing the opposite over the next 3 days. I want you to be more present, not less. So that's kind of my hesitation and warning about high intensity exercise. But again, you know yourself. So for some of you, high intensity is fine. And yes, if you want to move for more than 30 minutes, and if it doesn't put too much of a emotional or physical strain on you to do so, as with all these things, go for it. All of these will be more of a floor than a ceiling. On a personal level, I walk for 45 minutes to an hour every day. That's pretty easy for me. But my goal here is to find the minimum viable dose for this prescription. And I believe, based on what I have observed, that for most people, 30 minutes of gentle, pleasurable exercise is that minimum viable dose. So that's number 1, 30 minutes of gentle, pleasurable exercise. The second one is 30 minutes of journaling per day. 30 minutes of journaling per day. I'm just laughing to myself as I say this because I'm like, some of you are going to hate this. But I have found, both in my own life and in my coaching clients, that just the act of writing slows down the brain, forces it to focus rather than ruminate, helps to process feelings, and that even in just 3 days, you don't have to make a lifelong commitment to journaling, just the 3 days can lead to quite significantly higher levels of insight and self-understanding than is possible from just sort of ruminating on this issue in your brain, letting this issue sort of bounce around in your brain. If you know that you need insight on a particular topic, of course, that would be great to spend your time journaling on. I would certainly recommend starting there, even if it's just making a list of all the things that are bothering you or worrying you about that topic. Even just focusing on what's wrong at first can kind of naturally and organically lead to figuring out what to do about it. The solution or insight can often just kind of pop up But even if nothing in particular is bothering you, and even if you're writing about nothing much at all, maybe just some random thoughts about your week, or maybe just making a list about every piece of clothing you'd buy. If somebody handed you $5,000 and said, you need to buy only clothing with this. Even if you're reflecting just on that, it's often true that an insight that is incredibly powerful and useful will suddenly pop up in the middle of all of that. You'll suddenly think, oh my gosh, that's why I can't release my resentment towards my college roommate, or whatever it is that's on your mind. My strong recommendation is that you journal with pen and paper rather than on a computer. I've just found, again, for myself and also with my clients, that when you slow down enough to write with a pen and paper, you just reap far more benefits from the journaling process. So at least for those 3 days, that's what I would do. And again, as with all of this, you can certainly do more, but I do think that 30 minutes is the minimum viable dose. So that's number 2, 30 minutes of journaling per day. And then number 3 is shower and attend to your appearance. What I mean when I say shower is probably clear. And I just want to clarify what I mean when I say attend to your appearance. I mean that in a pretty open-ended way. It just means attend to your appearance so that you feel pleased when you look in the mirror. You could wear some clothes that you like, or style your hair in a way that is appealing to you. You might need to shave or wear some makeup or jewelry if those are things you happen to enjoy. And I will say that this can be tricky for some of us in some stages of our lives. Like maybe you don't currently fit into your favorite clothes, as an example. And of course, in a more medium or long-term sense, you could certainly go buy more. I would never discourage you from doing that. But also for purposes of this prescription, if you don't have time or budget to, for example, rent out and buy new clothes, you could just wear the clothes you like best of the clothes that do fit. So maybe instead of those ratty loose pajama pants, you just wear a loose flowing dress or whatever is equivalent to you that is clean, and maybe the colors are nice, even if it's not your absolute favorite. And maybe you just put some moisturizer on, and that really does the trick. And again, for some of you, this isn't even worth saying. It's like, yeah, of course, I do that every day. But for others of you, and I would put myself in the latter category, this can be a helpful reminder. Because honestly, sometimes I stop feeling as well as I'd like. And also, I happen to have been wearing my ratty green shorts for days, and my hair has been in a ponytail for weeks, and just wearing mascara makes me feel like a supermodel. So if you need this reminder, here it is. Number 3, shower and attend to your appearance. Number 4 is get 8 hours of sleep. Minimum. It's easy to brush off this one because basically everyone, everywhere, all the time is probably telling you to get more sleep. But if you are more anxious than you'd like, or more down than you'd like, or convinced that you need to make a radical life change, I would highly, highly, highly recommend doing whatever you need to do to get more sleep. I know. It seems boring and lame. And it's so much more fun to think about whether you need to radically rearrange your life. But honestly, get sleep for 3 consecutive days before you even talk to me about radical life change. Okay? I'm not joking. So that's number 4. Get 8 hours of sleep a night for 3 nights in a row. Number 5 is feed yourself food that is nourishing and pleasurable. This is another kind of boring one that, yes, annoyingly, can make a really big difference in all of that stuckness or downness or anxiety-ness. And to be clear, I'm not here to suggest any particular mode of eating, but I would like for you to nourish yourself in a way that's pleasurable. I would not like it to be some sort of ascetic, deprived situation that's super healthy, but also feels like you're a monk from the Middle Ages who has scorned the pleasures of the flesh. That's not what you need right now. Because I don't want you making some huge energy expenditure on something extreme, which is what it would be if you suddenly went on keto or whatever. I just want you returning to yourself very kindly and very gently. I want the metaphorical equivalent of relaxing onto a clean, soft bed with crisp sheets. Like, that is how I want your eating to make you feel. So that's why I say nourishing and pleasurable, because I want you to have that feeling from your eating. I think most of us kind of know the foods that make us feel good while also giving us pleasure. And I would say, in my opinion, these 3 days are a time to, for example, splurge on a salad at that kind of overpriced salad place, or splurge on that sushi from Whole Foods, or whatever really does it for you. I don't want you spending a ton of energy on food prep either, unless that's something you really love to do. So that's number 5. Feed yourself food that is nourishing and pleasurable. Number 6 is to set specific intentions around your internet usage. This is a topic that merits multiple podcasts, and man, do I have multiple podcasts worth of things to say about it. But the key here is that you need to set some sort of intentions around your internet usage that would serve you. And when I say internet, that can be your phone or your computer or even your TV that you use to access Netflix, if that's an issue for you. And just to give some examples, the obvious first example is what I did the first time I created my own prescription. I only did leisure internet out of the house. But I would say that honestly, I wouldn't even do that anymore, mostly because of the way that my days are now structured. Because between seeing clients and picking one of my kids up at preschool, or wanting to be home so I can pop into a speech therapy session or an occupational therapy session or whatever for my kids, it can really be hard for me to have a solid stretch of 2 hours at a time to be able to leave my house on a consistent basis. I can do that 1 or 2 days a week for sure, but not necessarily every day. So sometimes now, if I need to, make a prescription for myself, sometimes for the 3 days of that, I might say to myself, I'm not going to use the internet till 2 p.m. Or sometimes I will just do like an hour of total leisure internet for the whole day that I can kind of use wherever. I just won't go over that 1 hour. 1 hour is a lot actually, but it's also really easy to go over that in my experience. Or I will very occasionally, to be honest, cut out all leisure internet except for a daily personal email check, just for those 3 days. And again, I don't do that indefinitely. It's just for the 3 days. But I have found that if I am really anxious and it's gotten really bad and I need to cool things down a bit, it can pretty significantly turn things around for me. And I realize even in saying that is not for everyone. So I'm just trying to give a whole range of examples, because I actually think that there are so many examples in this world about people who are super intentional about their eating or their working out or their productivity, but far fewer people who can give us examples of what that looks like in terms of internet and sort of screen usage. And look, I'm just a real person. I like YouTube. I like watching tango videos and SNL videos on YouTube. I like looking at the accounts of matchmakers on Instagram because I love. But I am also aware that sometimes setting some stricter boundaries than I typically would, again, just for those 3 days, can really have outsized returns for me and be totally worth it. So I just want to be an example for you of someone who, I like the internet, but I also do try to be intentional about it. So that's number 6, set some specific intentions around your internet usage. And then number 7 is to get out of the house every day. Again, for some of you, perhaps some of you who work in an office, this is just not even a big deal. But I have noticed that, especially post-COVID, when a lot of people now work from home, this can be an important reminder, because if you're not feeling great and your schedule allows, my recommendation would be a solid consecutive 2 hours outside the house every day. And as I've just said, those 2 consecutive hours are not always possible for me. Like, I need to be home for clients or kid-related things, and I can only have a 90-minute break between 2 things. And by the time I bike to the library and get home, there's just not that much time. And that's also true that, in this season of my life, I'm already just getting out of the house a bit more naturally than I did before I had kids. But also, if I feel genuinely down, I will set an intention around this. And even if I can't make the full 2 hours work, I will do that kind of annoying thing of getting out of the house, even though I have to be home an hour later. Because the point of this practice is to acknowledge that it is important to be around other people. You don't have to talk to them. If you're a big introvert like me, you don't have to spend the whole time chatting with people. I find that even just like a public library or a coffee shop where people are quietly doing their own thing can be incredibly beneficial. It's about acknowledging that being around people and being in a world where people are existing and moving around, there's an energy to that and a vibrancy to that. And we all need it, even gigantic, huge introverts like me. And if you are deficient in that, you will suffer and you will feel bad. And you might think that something is seriously wrong in your life when really you just need to be out in the world every day. So that's number 7, get out of the house every day. And that is all 7. So to summarize, number 1 was 30 minutes of gentle, pleasurable exercise. Number 2 is 30 minutes of journaling. Number 3 is shower and attend to your appearance. Number 4 is get 8 hours of sleep minimum. Number 5, feed yourself food that is nourishing and pleasurable. Number 6 is set specific intentions around your internet usage. And number 7 is get out of the house every day. And for those of you who are sitting here being like, I don't have time to exercise and journal and sleep, it's not possible. If you cleaned up your internet usage, I think it would be possible. Okay. The last thing I want to say is it's easy to skim over this list and kind of think, oh, I do some of that already. I don't need to do this. But are you feeling anxious or frustrated or stuck or not right? If so, I dare you to try it, to commit in a very serious way to whichever ones you are not currently doing. Because even if you do most of them, do you do all of them? And if not, do the ones that you are not currently doing. Fix them for 3 days, 3 consecutive days, and only then come talk to me. I will not discuss, do I need to make a major life change? Or am I a failure? Or maybe adult life is just kind of dull and disappointing until these actions have been completed in full for 3 consecutive days. Reminder, 1 day is not enough. 2 days are not enough. 3 consecutive days. And as I've said, it might not fix everything, but it will significantly reduce stress and anxiety, and it will give you more clarity of mind. Hopefully enough clarity of mind to come up with a more wise sense of the right next steps for you. Okay. Thanks, everyone. As always, I'm rooting for you. If you really want to change in a meaningful, lasting way, that's when you need a life coach. Every client I've worked with has had incredibly personalized reasons why they're in the tired or anxious or stuck or uninspired state they're in. Working with me can help you identify those roadblocks, which are usually blind spots that you genuinely cannot see, and implement a profoundly customized, doable plan for overcoming them. I have a very small, high-end, one-on-one coaching practice. If you'd like to be my next client, reach out at katiesiever.com. I'd love to meet you.